Good evening, good afternoon, good wherever you are, whatever you are, however you are. Good to see you. I'm Tad. Still, despite everything, still Tad. Hanging in, about to go read some stuff and share it with y'all. And I think that's kind of the main theme is that there's not a huge amount to report, as I was saying last night when I was reading, because nothing exciting is happening in the sense of, anything worth explaining to people about or describing or telling tales about. At the moment, we're just involved in a lot of domestic stuff. As I mentioned, the office room here has become a repository for many things from many places. So although you can't see most of it, the floor is covered with boxes and things. So just to get from one side of it to another requires a certain nimbleness of step, a certain Baryshnikovian grace to manage to make one's way around. So what else is going on? Working on the rewrite of Navigator's Children. This is the more or less final rewrite. And I've been moving at a fairly fast pace, and then the last few couple of days I have been stuck reworking a single chapter, which is immensely frustrating for me at this late stage of things that it should take this long, just to rewrite a chapter or just to change some things in a chapter. But so that's what I've been doing. So I've been gritting my teeth and making weird moaning noises to myself for the last 48 hours as I try to thrash my way through this particular set of small problems. What else? Had a gorgeous day today. I hope wherever you are, some of you had the same. If you're in my neck of the woods, you will know that we actually had a warm, sunny day, which is the first since, God, I literally don't remember when. And for California, in the middle, getting on towards the middle of April, that is very unusual. So whether somebody arranged it particularly special for Easter, which kind of snuck up on me this year, or just a fact that just happened. It was really nice today. I had to go out and run a couple of errands, and just to be able to go outside in a t-shirt and enjoy the sun was a real pleasure. So let me think. Anything else worth talking about? Not really. It's just been, as I said, it's been a lot of work. We're doing a lot of different things. We are deep in all kinds of activities. I'm working on Navigator's Children. I'm thinking already in some detail about the rewrite of the third Ordinary Farm book. Of course, we are reading the second Ordinary Farm book. But I'm thinking about what's going to happen with that. Deb has already written a first draft, but there's still a lot of shuffling and moving things around. And of course, one thing about the Ordinary Farm books, as those of you who haven't read them will discover as I'm reading this one, if you didn't know it already, is there are time paradoxes. Yes, there is time travel. And as a result, it gets increasingly complicated with each iteration, with each new volume, until by the third volume, I'm having to literally sit down and make maps of how the different timelines come together, which is crazy to be doing this for an all ages book. But anybody who knows me knows I am an absolute stickler for things like that, no matter who the audience is. It's, as I always say, you write a book for yourself. That's the best tip for any, up and coming writers of any kind. Don't write a book for an imaginary audience. Don't write a book for even, an editor, much as you may respect and love them. You write the book that you want to read, and you then hope that there are other people out there who like the same things that you like. But the reason for that is because you can't really trust an imaginary audience or your grasp of an imaginary audience. And instead, you can only really look at yourself and say, does this work for me? Is this what I would want to see here? Is this the kind of thing that I would like to read? Does this insult my intelligence? Or does it make me think, ooh, cool, that's really exciting. Oh, I really want to find that out. Ooh, that's the kind of character I love. That's the only way to write, as far as I'm concerned, is to write for oneself, first and foremost. So, when I'm writing anything, whether it's an all ages book, short story, novel, I'm trying to write a film script or something like that, it always has to be written with myself as the audience. And one of the things about me as an audience, as a reader, is I have a huge willingness to suspend my disbelief, but I still very much want internal consistency. I want, once whatever rules have been put together, have been explained or laid out, or however they come to the reader's attention, I want them to make sense and to be respected. I cannot stand when people pull a card out at the last moment. It just drives me nuts. And it's one of the reasons when I'm writing these big, complicated, multi-volume stories, that they get increasingly difficult as I get down towards the end of the story, because there is always a certain amount of fidgeting and fudging involved in putting together a big, big story, or a very complicated story of any kind. And the more complicated it is, the more you are going to be treading on the toes of coincidence. You are going to have circumstances arise where the things that you want to have happen have to be manipulated by the creator, the writer, the director, if it's film or television, whatever it might be. And because that manipulation is necessary, it's very, very hard to imagine how you would make a story where everything happened in a perfectly naturalistic way, unless you were writing naturalistic fiction. I am not. We are not. We as a genre are not. We are writing a form of adventure fiction with a certain set of rules and responsibilities. And so whether you are writing, whatever you're writing, you have to manipulate certain aspects of the story to make things happen the way you want them to happen, to put characters in a situation where they will be available and willing to do something that needs to be done, or whether you will bring certain aspects together at a certain point, or whatever it might be. And that's fine. That's how this kind of thing works. But what you need to do always is to make sure at least that it feels organic within the structure of the thing you're making. So the reader will suspend disbelief, but only so far. And at a certain point, if you stretch that suspension too far, it snaps and the reader falls, or at least they lose their willingness to go along with what you're doing. So even in a kid's book, it's super important to me that an Ordinary Farm is not technically a kid's book in the sense it's not Dr. Seuss or something like that, but it is considered an all ages book. And even in the process of putting together a book for younger readers, I'm writing for me. I'm trying to write for maybe my 12-year-old self or my 11-year-old self, because I read, a fairly advanced age. I read a fairly advanced level when I was young. So I'm imagining a reader very much like me, somewhere between, late elementary school and high school. And as a result, it has to make sense. It has to make sense to me, and it has to make everything has to happen in a way that feels natural within the world. And when you combine that with a lot of imaginary creatures that have to feel as though they could live, and that they would, and in the case of Ordinary Farm, not just that they could live, but that they did live at some point unknown or unremembered in the history of the earth. Therefore, they have to feel biologically and evolutionarily realistic in some ways. So at least, again, this is me. These are my standards. But those are the ones that matter when I'm the writer. And so then you have to, and then you add to that a number of other things, including, let's face it, a kind of magic. I mean, the washstand mirror, as we will see in very soon in this book, and as we saw in the first volume, for those of you who read it, the washstand mirror is essentially magical. and the fault line is much closer to science fiction. So we're combining a number of weird disciplines into one story. And as I mentioned, yeah, the science fiction in this case includes a form of time travel, which has to resolve paradoxes and has to make a certain sense in and of itself. So even though it's an all ages book or a young adult book or whatever you want to call it, it just as hard to write. Shorter, fortunately, but it's just as hard to write as the Navigator's Children that I'm just finishing, or To Green Angel Tower, or anything like that. When you're wrapping up a story, you still have to find ways, organic ways, to bring all the characters together, to make the things happen in the right order that you want to have happen. And you have to put together this entire laundry list of coincidences, happenstances, all kind, serendipity to a small degree. You can't get away with too much serendipity. And they have to feel to the reader as they read, like, okay, that makes sense. Or, yeah, I wondered when we'd see that thing again, or that person, or, the worst thing is if they go, oh, come on. It's like he just totally dragged that out and threw it in there just to make that happen. And, or, he in this case being, people reading one of my books. So it's always interesting. It's always interesting. And I think I began this to say, so I'm doing this very complicated Navigator's Children thing with the story having to do all of these things. And it's a 1,200 page novel in manuscript. And it follows on the heels of several other very long books, many very long books, and doesn't just wrap up this series, the one that began with the Witchwood Crown, but wraps up everything, or at least has ramifications from all the other stories, including the Dragonbone Chair books, etc., all coming home to roost, as it were, in this final volume. I'm doing something similar with the Ordinary Farm book, although thank God I'm not writing it yet. I'm just planning it. And I'm trying to do this with the next novel that I'm going to be writing, the next original novel, which will be the first Flan's Crows novel, which, as I think I mentioned last night, is called The Splintered Sun. And although it's an Ostenard novel also, it takes place, hundreds of years before the Dragonbone Chair. So a lot of world building there and a lot of the same kinds of issues, but it also has to all fit within the canon. There's a word that we hardly ever used to use until the internet, but now it's existed long before the internet, the idea of a canon, C-A-N-O-N. But the internet has brought it to the forefront, along with the word meme, which I remember when I was using it in other land, it was like a comparatively unused phrase. I mean, I had gotten it from, I've just gone blank on his name, but the guy who wrote The Blind Watchmaker and all that, evolutionary biologist. It'll come to me. I'm listening to Johnny barking up there. So the Richard Dawkins, as far as I know, coined the word meme to be the intellectual property or idea version of a gene. A genetic unit is a gene, and a memetic unit is a meme. And of course, it's now become shorthand for virtually anything that winds up on the internet that people pass around to each other. So there's a number of factors. Anyway, I don't know how I got started on all this, but I was just talking about how I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed occasionally by how many stories are crashing around in my brain and how much attention they all require. Anyway, so let me check really quickly to see if I can make any sense out of... No, I don't want that. Go away. Sorry, I'm talking to my screen here. I want to check in and see who has arrived, or at least who has commented. And I see Jack Riggins. Hello, Jack. I see Winter. Hello, Winter. Chris Vandal. And Claudia. Hello. Medardo, my friend. Tracy. Hello, Tracy. Alexis. Turgeon. Hey, good to see you. Ray Weatherford and G. Paget. And who else we got? Kelly. Kenrick. Barb Ann is here. Ron. My friend Ron is here. And Carl Dersham. Susan Shamblin, Christy Sanders, and Penny Davies are all the people who have dropped off a comment so far. So as I said, I'm not reading the comments. I'm just reading the list of the people who have checked in. Anyway, I believe that I have. I assume somebody would tell me, by the way, if for some reason that there was you couldn't hear me or something. So I will just double check here. Oh, I hate the comments thing. No, they won't let me. It would be too easy for them to actually let me see the comments that people are making while the thing is happening. That would be too easy. Anyway, my my long struggles with Facebook. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I will try and find anybody else who checks in later on. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start reading. And for those of you who have not yet listened to the broadcast, the main thing about the last reading was that it is the 4th of July in Standard Valley, and the kids from Ordinary Farm, including Colin, and with being, chaperoned by Ragnar and Mr. Walkwell, have gone to the Carrillos, the kids' friends who live on the next farm over, a place called Cresta Sol. And they have gone for the 4th of July party, just like last year. And at first it seemed quite grim because Gideon having disappeared. But even before he disappeared, he had refused to get back to the Carrillos, who are being troubled by offers to buy their property by the billionaire Ed Stillwell. And so things were a little difficult, but things finally began to cheer up and kind of get swinging, as it were, at the 4th of July party. And then Lucinda looks up and sees somebody stumbling across the fields towards the house where they're having the party, and realizes this is Gideon, who's been missing for some time. Can't remember exactly how long. So that's where we are. Chapter 15. One freaky fourth. One moment, Tyler and Steve Carrillo were loudly explaining to Colin Know-Nothing Needle how full of bull he was, that video games not only didn't make you stupid, they improved your hand-eye coordination. They even used them to train the United States Army. Then the next moment, everybody was running around yelling, "Call a doctor!" and "Somebody tell Hector!" Tyler heard his sister shouting the name Gideon, and he and Colin both jumped up at the same time and ran toward the front yard. Gideon Goldring, looking sick and exhausted and very thin, was crouched in the late afternoon sun, surrounded by Lucinda and Carmen and Alma and a growing crowd of other Carrillo relatives. As Lucinda gave Gideon a drink from a bottle of water someone had brought from the kitchen, Mr. Walkwell and Ragnar suddenly appeared around the corner of the house at a run. "Where did he come from?" Ragnar demanded. He just showed up," Lucinda said. "He came across the fields." Tyler heard something else above the babble of voices, a thin, high-pitched cry in the distance. Colin Needle, who had been staring down at Gideon with his mouth hanging open, looked up and then shook his head like someone waking up too fast. "Hang on, that's my mother." And indeed another shape was bumping across the fields towards the Carrillo's house, half walking, half trotting. Patience Needle, in her old-fashioned clothes, waving her arms and shouting, "Don't touch him!" Tyler realized he had never heard the witch raise her voice before. "Don't!" she cried as she hurried toward them. "You must leave him alone!" Gideon was so pale that his skin was almost green, his forehead damp with sweat. Sorry, let me start that again. Gideon was so pale that his skin was almost green, his forehead damp with sweat. "Won't!" he suddenly said, pulling away from the bottle so that water splashed onto his chest. He tried to grab at Lucinda's arm, but his eyes, though wide, didn't seem to see anything, and his hands were twitching too much for him to control them. "Won't go back." "Back where, Gideon?" Ragnar asked. "Where have you been?" But the old man was lost in some world of his own, head rolling from side to side as he struggled to get up. "You can't," he said, smacking at the hands of those who were trying to restrain him. "Let go of me, you damn monster!" "We have to take him to a hospital," said Hector Carrillo. "No!" Mrs. Needle all but screamed. She staggered over and knelt beside Gideon, holding his head with one hand while feeling his wrist and forehead. "No hospital. He will be fine. I know how to help him. We need only get him back to the farm. I have medicines there. Special things." "You're crazy if you think I'm going to let you drag this man away, this sick man, before he's even been examined by a doctor." Mr. Carrillo stood up. "Ragnar, Simos, put him into my truck." "Shouldn't we call an ambulance, Dad?" Carmen asked. "I can get him to the clinic at Liberty in 25 minutes, Hector told her. "It'll take at least that long to get an ambulance out here." Mrs. Needle gave him a glare that could have stripped paint, but Mr. Carrillo just stared back at her with calm authority. Tyler couldn't help being impressed. "Then I will go too," she said at last. "I found him wandering at the farm and chased him all the way here. I will not leave him so easily." "Don't let her." Tyler looked at Lucinda in surprise. "Luce?" But his sister was already pulling on Mr. Carrillo's arm. "Don't let her. I'll bet she's the one who did this to him. Gave him some kind of potion or something. And she's probably the one keeping Gideon from answering your calls, too. She probably doesn't even tell him. That's what she did to us last year." "How dare you?" Mrs. Needle rose to her feet and stood over Lucinda, her face white and her expression so furious that even Mr. Carrillo took a step back. "How dare you talk like that in front of strangers? Lucinda Jenkins, what a terrible thing to say. They're not strangers to us. They're our friends." His sister looked terrified but determined. Tyler felt real pride in her. "You tell him, sis," he said. Patience Needle let her gaze linger on Lucinda a moment longer, then turned to Mr. and Mrs. Carrillo, the anger now wiped from her face. "Everyone has been worried for Gideon. He's been missing for days. You can see how upset we all are. I've been his doctor for years, more or less. Please don't let the words of a frightened, confused child keep me away from him." "But how did Gideon get past the fences?" Mr. Walkwell demanded. Mrs. Needle drew herself up straight. "I turned them off when I saw him stumbling along in the distance like a madman. Of course. Did you think I would let our employer be fatally electrified?" Mr. Walkwell snorted, but he turned and began trotting back toward Ordinary Farm. "Then I must make the fences work again before any more trouble happens." Lucinda guessed he would shed his boots as soon as he was out of sight. On his naked hooves he could run like the wind. For a long moment Mr. Carrillo's gaze had been resting on Lucinda. Now he turned to the housekeeper with a hard smile. "Yes, I suppose you can come with us to the hospital, Mrs. Needle, but we'll need to take more than one car. Might as well take all the kids, too. They could see the fireworks in Liberty." He turned to his wife. "Sylvia, where's your brother?" "Ah," he waved to a man with a beard whose tattoos Tyler had admired earlier. "Jaime, you have your van, right? You bring the kids and follow me." Ragnar and Mr. Walkwell had been talking quietly. "I will come too, Hector," the Norseman said, "and Simos will go home and make certain things are well there, because he does not like driving in cars so much." "Where could he have been?" Tyler shouted to Lucinda over the noise of Jaime's stereo, which was blaring Mexican heavy metal music, something Tyler hadn't even known existed. "We looked everywhere. Do you think Gideon was in, the fault line?" If he could hardly hear himself, he realized there probably wasn't too much danger Jaime was listening to their conversation from the front seat. "I wonder what Mrs. Needle knows about it. I'll bet she and Colin had him knocked out somewhere, drugged or something." Lucinda frowned at him. "That's not fair." she shouted. "Colin was just as surprised as we were. I was watching him." Tyler had his doubts. He had already decided that Lucinda was too soft on Colin Needle. "Then, if he's so shocked, why isn't he here? Why isn't he coming to the hospital?" Lucinda shook her head. "He is. He's in the truck with Mr. Carrillo." Tyler made a face. "Oh, he's too good to ride with us, huh?" His sister glared at him. "You are totally a jerk, Tyler Jenkins," she said, which was, of course, totally unfair. The town of Liberty was what Standard Valley would like to be when it grew up, Tyler decided. Not that Liberty was big. It was probably less than half the size of Tyler and Lucinda's hometown, but it was big enough to have a 4th of July parade, which was just ending, and also big enough to have a fire department, several schools, and a movie theater, none of which could be found in Standard Valley. Tyler saw all this as Jaime followed Mr. Carrillo through town toward the clinic, a generic-looking building with a red-tiled roof that, if it had been a bit smaller, could have passed for a fast food restaurant. Hector Carrillo and his passengers had beaten them there. Ragnar, Colin, and Mr. Carrillo were already in the urgent care waiting room. "My mother's filling out the forms," Colin said. "She knows all the information, the insurance and all that." "You have insurance?" Tyler wondered how people from the past could manage that without birth certificates or whatever normal folk had. Colin gave him a look of contempt. "Gideon does." Mr. Carrillo walked over. "Look, why don't you children go out and see a little of the town? Jaime, go with them, will you? It'll be dark soon. They have fireworks in the park. Carmen, you have your phone?" "Got it, Papacito." "Good. Check back in with us in an hour or so." Ragnar walked to the door with him, his bearded face very stern and serious. "Don't worry, children. Gideon will be well again. I will make certain of that." Tyler hoped for the doctor's sake that they didn't make the big man angry. They walked with Jaime back into the middle of town. Tyler had forgotten what it was like to see so many people, or at least to see so many people he didn't know. Living on ordinary farm was a bit like living on a ship out on the ocean, in this case an ocean of farmland. Every now and then you took a lifeboat into Standard Valley and drank a milkshake at the diner or met up with the Carrillos, but the rest of the time you saw nothing but the same people day after day. But here in Liberty, even though the 4th of July parade was over, it still felt like a parade. The seemingly endless stream of faces. Kids, grown-ups, old people, folks laughing and drinking and eating. People shouting greetings across the main street to neighbors and friends. "Uncle Jaime," said Alma, "take us to the North Pole, please." "You just had dinner," he said, "and dessert, too." "Please. I want peppermint bark," she said, at which point Tyler realized they were talking about an ice cream store. By the time they got to the park, they were sucking the last of the melted ice cream through the bottoms of their sugar cones. Carmen phoned her father, who said that Gideon was doing much better, that he was making sense now, even though he didn't seem to remember anything from the last few days. Her father said the doctors were calling his condition heat prostration. Tyler thought that was all well and good, but it didn't really explain where the old man had been for almost a week. It was nearly dark, and people were still streaming into the park. Carmen, Alma, and Steve went to get drinks. Uncle Jaime had bought himself a beer and was sitting on the grass, happily drinking it and talking to a woman he seemed to know. Lucinda leaned over to Tyler. "Look what Gideon was holding," she said. She held out her hand. Tyler stared at the dark fibrous strands, hard to make out in the fading light. "What are they?" "I don't know. Some kind of plants, I think. He was hanging on to them like they meant something important." Tyler shrugged. "But what made him crazy? That's the real question." Lucinda wasn't listening anymore. She was staring over his shoulder with eyes wide as the silver dollar on Uncle Jaime's belt buckle. "Tyler, It's him! Who? What are you talking about? He half expected to see Gideon running toward them across the park grass, bathrobe flapping, pursued by doctors and nurses. But he saw only an undifferentiated crowd of people loitering around the edge of the grass, waiting for the fireworks to begin. I don't see. There! She leaned in close to him. Don't stare. Don't point. There, by the fountain. It's that man, Kingery. Tyler had never seen him, of course, but Lucinda's description of him as looking like a bad guy in a cowboy movie had stuck in his mind, so he had no doubt about which one she meant. The tall, thin man in the long black coat, a strange thing to be wearing in summer weather, even at night, was talking to a round-faced man in more modern clothing, a beige sports coat. Even as Tyler watched, the tall man looked around as if concerned someone might be eavesdropping. Then he grabbed the man in the sports coat by his elbow and marched him toward an open-sided gazebo in one corner of the park. They're going to that building over there, Tyler said, jumping to his feet. Come on, we can go around and through the trees on the far side. We'll be able to hear what they're saying. What? Are you crazy? Lucinda shrank away. I'm not going near that guy. What if he's the one who kidnapped Gideon? What if he's looking for him now? Tyler couldn't believe his sister would go all girly on him at a time like this. Come on! Even as he led her around the edge of the grass, past all the people sitting on blankets staring up at the sky expectantly, she was still trying to talk him out of it. What about Carmen and the others? What about Jaime? Shouldn't we tell them we're only going to the other side of the park? Grow up, Luce. He hurried them through the trees and over a low picket fence until the gazebo stood only a couple of yards away. Lucinda looked absolutely miserable, so Tyler decided that he wouldn't climb the tree after all, although it would have let him shinny out on a branch until he was right over the roof of the building. Instead, he moved as close as he could, while still being ready to run at a moment's notice, until he could hear voices. He guessed that the high, slightly nervous tones belonged to the man in the beige coat. Just don't understand, that's all. There's nothing to understand, Mr. Dankel. That was Kingery, Tyler had no doubt, a voice as menacing as a scorpion poised to sting. I have given you good American money already. To earn the rest of it, you will come when you are called and do what you are told. Of course. Haven't I helped you, like I said I would? The man was almost squeaking. I have to think about. I have my reputation. Listen to me, lawyer. Kingery's sudden words were like the crack of a gunshot. I have killed better men than you with my bare hands, so I would advise you not to make me angry. It was dark now, but Tyler could see Lucinda's pale face and staring eyes beside him. He prayed she didn't lose her nerve and make some noise that would give them away. Remember, Kingery went on, you are in this thing far too deep to start getting any pretty sensibilities now. When it is time, I will call for you, and you had best be prepared to come with me. It will be at night. I suggest you keep your evenings free for the next few weeks. What do you mean? When are you coming? I do not know that, Mr. Dankel, but believe me, when the hour comes, you will be among the first to know. And you will do what you are told. Do you understand me? Dankel must have nodded, because suddenly Kingery walked out of the gazebo and set out along the path at the edge of the park, his coat billowing like the wings of some great black bird. He strode past the seated families just as the first fireworks burst in the sky overhead, great glittering, spark-dripping flowers of gold and red. People shouted in pleasure. Nobody, except Tyler and Lucinda, saw the tall man go. They were all too busy watching the fire in the sky. Chapter 16. Searching for Ordinary. hot sun, chores to do, animals to feed, maybe a nap before dinner if she was lucky and got her work done early. Lucinda wouldn't have gone so far as to say things were back to normal, but as she and Tyler hiked across the fields toward the reptile barn, she realized that for the first time in several days she didn't feel frightened. Their great-uncle Gideon was still in the hospital, but he'd be coming home today. The doctors at Liberty Medical Center still didn't know what was wrong with him, but Ragnar said Gideon was almost himself again, even though the period of his disappearance remained a blank. "Okay, so what's he doing?" Tyler said. "I still don't get it." Lucinda had been admiring her new bracelet, the gift from Carmen, which made a very nice companion for the unicorn hair bracelet the three amigos had given her. She shook her head. "Who? Doing what?" "Kingery! What's he up to with that Dankel guy, that lawyer?" "How should I know? And what makes you think it has anything to do with us?" Tyler stared at her. "Duh! He's a really bad guy, and he came out of the fault line. Everything about him has something to do with us, or at least with the farm." Lucinda frowned. The only problem with the new bracelet was that when she lowered her arm, it slid all the way to her hand, and the charms interfered with picking things up. She pushed it up her forearm until it felt snug. "That doesn't mean it's anything to do with all the other stuff going on. Gideon and everything else you're obsessed with, Alamu and the fire and Octavio's crazioscope. Continuoscope. Yeah, that's the other thing." Tyler frowned, trying to get his thoughts in order. "Okay, so Gideon disappears, and just at the same time, Kingery comes back after all these years. Meanwhile, Colin's all, 'I'm researching the continuoscope.'" He did a terrible imitation of Colin's careful speech. "Which has been missing since the night of the laboratory fire, which is also the night Kingery disappeared. And you're telling me it's all coincidence." I'm not saying it's all coincidence," she began. "So shut up, then." But he smiled to show her he was mostly kidding. For a moment she remembered both why she loved her little brother and why she often wanted to kill him. See, it would make sense that Kingery stole the continuoscope and set the fire to cover up. But Mr. Walkwell says no. He says Alamu the dragon burned the lab down. He grabbed his head like it hurt. "Oh, man, am I missing anything?" Lucinda smiled. "Just your sanity." She could see the reptile barn in the distance now, and her heart rose a little. "I'm coming," she thought, trying to send the idea ahead like a beam of light. "I'm bringing carrots." A moment later, she realized what she was doing, accusing her brother of being crazy while she tried to talk to a dragon with her mind. "What are you laughing about?" Tyler didn't wait long for an answer. "Anyway, something's missing here. I don't know what it is, but there's totally something missing. Why would Alamu be hanging around the lab? And why would he burn the place down? Maybe it was the only way he could get somebody to shut up." For a moment, Tyler actually looked puzzled, trying to make sense of what she'd said. Then he stuck his tongue out at her, something he hadn't done for a few years. "Oh, yeah, thanks, Luce. You're a fat lot of help." Desta knuckle-walked on her folded wings and rear legs toward the front of the pen, head turned sideways as she slyly watched the bag of carrots in Lucinda's hand. "I know you see them," Lucinda told her, or at least thought at her. It was hard to tell sometimes how much of Lucinda's meaning Desta was receiving. "Yes, they're for you, greedy girl." It was scarcely more than a wordless impulse, but it had meaning, and Lucinda understood it clearly. "I want." Haneb trundled past with a wagon full of carcasses for Meseret, who was sleeping underneath the banks of sun lamps that helped to keep the reptile barn even warmer than the California summer outside. "She wait for you, the young one," he said.
She know what time you here.
But I don't come here the same time every day, Lucinda said.
Hannah shrugged. She know when you come. Still, very smart, the illusionkan.
The strange word sounded like he was getting ready to spit. He smiled a little, embarrassed again, and translated.
Dragons.
How do you know so much about them? She asked, and held out the first carrot for Desta. The blue tongue curled, gently tugged, and the carrot disappeared from Lucinda's hand.
Good, she thought. Good girl. I come with them from where I was.
What Ragnar had said was true, then. Will you tell me about it? He gaped at her, his one visible eye wide, the other hidden by his curtain of hair.
I have work. Sorry, Miss Lucinda, the big one must be fed.
He gestured to the wagon and the deer carcasses that were already drawing flies on this hot day.
I have work.
Which, Lucinda could tell, really meant, please don't make me talk about it. Ragnar had said he was already scarred when he came to Ordinary Farm as a child.
Of course, Haneb, I'm sorry.
Oh, man, Tyler said loudly. What are you doing here? She turned to see Colin Needle, who had stopped many yards away from Lucinda and the others, as if a deadly swamp lay between him and them.
Don't start with me, Jenkins.
No, really, every time I turn around, there you are. You spying on us? Tyler walked toward Colin, his hands dangling down at his sides, shoulders back, chest out.
Stop it, Tyler. Boys, thought Lucinda, always posturing. Yes, males, so foolish, so fierce.
For a moment, Lucinda thought someone had said it out loud, a deep, resonant voice with a bass hum like a church organ. Then she realized it was in her head and only in her head, and that it hadn't been words, but only ideas.
Meseret?
Lucinda asked. Is that you? It was the first time she'd had a real communication from the big dragon since the night they had flown together.
Well, you flew,
Lucinda corrected herself. I mostly screamed and hung on. Do you remember? A faint impression of amusement touched her, followed by something much more harsh, an angry thought that scalded like acid.
Night they stole my egg. Night that creature stole my egg.
Meseret clearly knew who Colin was. The massive dragon stretched, suddenly restless in her harness, and the heavy industrial fabric creaked. But she's here now, Lucinda thought hurriedly. She didn't want to see Colin Needle burn to ashes. Your baby, your egg, she's alive and safe. See? Carrots. This nudging thought drifted over from Desta. Have more. Give. Tyler and Colin were still staring each other down. What are you babbling about now, Jenkins? The older boy said. Do you think I want to be here? With these monsters? He cast a quick, fearful look toward Meseret. I was sent to get you. Personally, I'd be happy to leave you to your little games and your... He looked from Lucinda to the baby dragon. Animal friends. He could be nice if he wanted to, Lucinda thought. Every now and then he showed it. Why did Colin Needle always turn back into such a creep? Angry. It was feelings that came to her, not words, and they came from Desta. Frightened. Tangled. Lucinda almost dropped the bag of carrots. It was the first time she had ever had anything but the simplest communication from Desta, anything but childlike greed, pleasure, or discontent. It's about Gideon, Colin continued sullenly. My mother called to say they're bringing him home from the hospital. If you really want to be doing something else when he comes back, fine, be my guest. But it will look pretty bad. Desta, Tell me that again, Lucinda thought, but the dragon was distracted now by the carrots in Lucinda's hand. After a few more fruitless attempts to communicate, she gave Desta the last of them as Colin watched. She really does like you. The tall boy sounded a little wistful. Of course, it was his own fault if the dragons didn't like him, Lucinda thought. He had kidnapped Desta when she was in her egg, after all. But, to be fair, he hadn't known there was a live baby dragon inside. You look nice today, Colin, she said, trying to be pleasant in turn. Tyler, who had been ready to slug the older boy a moment before, stared at her in disgusted disbelief. Very dressed up. He seemed surprised by the compliment. Thank you. Well, since it's Gideon's first day back, I thought... He stopped abruptly and shook his head as though he had caught himself doing something dangerous. Anyway, I'll wait for you outside. I don't really want to be set on fire today. He backed toward the entrance. I guess we'd better follow him, said Lucinda. She had one last carrot for Desta, but had to dig deep into her pocket. When she found it and extended her hand, the charm bracelet slid down and clinked to a stop around her wrist. Desta lunged so swiftly that Lucinda barely even saw her move, striking like an angry rattlesnake. But instead of grabbing at the final carrot, the dragon's long teeth snagged in Lucinda's bracelet and snapped it loose from her wrist. The bracelet dropped into Desta's pen, even as Lucinda staggered back, shocked by the sudden attack. Desta, no! She thought as forcefully as she could, angry but also fearful that the young dragon would swallow the bracelet and harm herself. Don't you dare! But Desta ignored her, moving toward the shiny thing as though nothing else existed in the world. I said no! It happened so quickly, Lucinda didn't understand it for a moment. The young dragon jumped back as if burned, then crouched down, hissing, as though she had been struck. But it wasn't just that Lucinda's angry thoughts had scared her. I made her do that, Lucinda realized. I made her move back, just with my thoughts. It hadn't felt good at all, forcing the young dragon away from the bracelet against her greedy will, but somehow Lucinda had reached out and made her do it. Wow, she thought. What just happened? While Lucinda and Desta stood staring at each other, the alarmed dragon's fins erect and quivering at the sides of her head, Haneb leaped forward and pulled the silver bracelet out with the handle of his rake, then shoved it into Lucinda's hand as if it was stolen property. Hide, or else she will try again to take it. Don't bring things like this here. He sounded cross, as if Lucinda had done something very foolish. Things like this? She stared at the young dragon, who was pretending not to care, but whose orange eyes stared hungrily at the silver object as it disappeared into Lucinda's pocket. What do you mean? Stop. Why? Scared, Desta. Pretty. Love that. The smallest dragon was sulking. Dragons, like all shiny things, silver and gold and metal and glass. Haneb gently steered Lucinda further back from Desta's fence. Alamu is worst bad of all. His nest must be full of all shiny things he find or steal. Lucinda didn't even resist as Haneb hurried her and Tyler out of the barn. She wasn't worried about the bracelet, which could be fixed, but she was very excited about what else had happened. The dragons were talking to me, she thought. I was really learning something about them. But how did I make Desta move like that? It was like she was a puppet or something. Colin Needle was waiting for them outside. He looked so pathetic on his own that Lucinda said, You missed all the excitement. It wasn't quite the same as Meseret spitting fire at you, but Desta just tried to pull my arm off. Don't, Luce, said Tyler in a sharp warning tone that made her angry. What right did he have to stop her talking to Colin? Well, she did. She grabbed this bracelet on my arm. Haneb said that dragons love shiny things, that they'll steal them any chance they get. Lucinda, stop! Her brother was obviously upset. She turned on him. No, you shut up, Tyler Jenkins. I'm tired of you telling me what to do. She half expected to find Colin looking at her gratefully because she'd stuck up for him, but instead the older boy was staring at her brother. Tyler stared right back at him, both of them showing their teeth and glaring like puppies playing tug-of-war with a toy. Boys, she thought again. Meseret was so right. Strangely, Hector Carrillo and all three Carrillo children were waiting out in front of the farm's main gate when Lucinda and Tyler and the others from the house pulled up in the horse cart. Lucinda couldn't help wondering who had told them Gideon was coming back. I offered to drive Gideon home from the hospital, said Mr. Carrillo, patting the fender of his truck. But your Mrs. Needle wouldn't hear of it. Too much trouble, she says. We'll just take a cab. She's not our Mrs. Needle, growled Tyler. Still angry, Lucinda shushed him. Colin was standing only a short distance away, craning his neck to look for Gideon. Or was it his mother he was waiting for so anxiously? Colin might be a strange, difficult boy, Lucinda thought, but Patience Needle was a complete nightmare. How could anyone expect the poor kid to be normal? They saw the plume of dust from the farm road long before they saw the cab, but soon it appeared, a white and red smear against the brown of the hills. A few moments later the car pulled up beside the tall fence and the gate. It took a little while for Big Ragnar to unfold himself from the back seat, then more time to help Gideon out while Mrs. Needle paid the driver. Judging by the look on his face as he pulled away, Lucinda guessed she hadn't given the driver much of a tip, if any. Gideon looked small and unwell, but what was worse was that he almost didn't seem to notice what was going on, letting Ragnar help him but scarcely even looking up as the folks from the farm gathered around. Mr. Carrillo stepped forward with his hand extended. Nice to see you back, Gideon, said Hector. I hope when you've had a few days to recuperate, we can have that conversation I've been waiting for. Gideon looked down at Hector Carrillo's hand as if he didn't know what it was, then turned away and continued trudging toward the gate. He is still not well, Mrs. Needle said, not apologizing, but in a tone that suggested Mr. Carrillo should know that and should leave him alone. I'm sure he will be happy to speak to you when he's feeling better. She hurried after Gideon as the old man shuffled toward the gate on Ragnar's arm, as though she could not bear to be separated from him for long. Wow, said Carmen Carrillo. He looks weird. I thought somebody said he was better. Mr. Walkwell looked troubled. I apologize for Gideon, Hector, he said. Ragnar said he was much better, but now he seems ill again. Perhaps the ride made him that way. Those cars are foul things. Yes, maybe, but somebody has to talk to me soon, Simos, said Mr. Carrillo. Stillman's calling me every day. I can't wait forever. I've been begging for Gideon to deal with this for months. Mr. Walkwell pulled him aside for a quiet conversation. Colin and the other farm folk stood watching as Ragnar lifted Gideon onto the wagon, then followed after as it creaked back toward the house, all of them on foot this time, as though walking behind a funeral procession. The thought made Lucinda shiver. So what's going on with him anyway? Steve Carrillo asked. Do he look like a zombie? He didn't even look like himself, said little Alma. Like the real Gideon is lost in there somewhere. She hugged herself as if the hot day had made her shiver. Mr. Carrillo returned, his conversation with Mr. Walkwell finished. He did not look happy. Vámonos, kids, he said. In the truck.
We're not going to get anything done here today."
Lucinda waved as they drove off, but the Carrillo kids just looked embarrassed. As Mr. Walkwell turned the cart back toward the house, Lucinda realized her brother had been silent nearly the whole time since the reptile barn. Tyler hadn't even said anything to Steve Carrillo or asked what he was playing on his Game Boss. "That proves it," she thought gloomily. "The world really is coming to an end." Okay, I've got time to start the last chapter. Or not the last chapter, the next chapter. So, chapter 17, the famous and ancient bottle cap hoard. According to Mr. Walkwell, the male dragon Alamu had been around the night of the laboratory fire and had probably even caused it. Octavio Tinker's continuoscope had been gone since then. Jackson Kingery had also disappeared that night, but hadn't shown any sign of having the continuoscope then or since. And Haneb said dragons, and especially Alamu, loved to collect shiny things for their nests. The continuoscope had been very shiny. Elementary, my dear Watson, Tyler thought. Find Alamu's nest, find the continuoscope. More important, make sure Colin Needle didn't find it, because if Colin got hold of Octavio's invention, he'd be able to use the fault line. He'd be able to travel back and forth through time. In fact, Colin might even find a way into the washstand mirror world to rescue Grace, and then Gideon would put him in the will instead of Tyler and Lucinda. The biggest problem, of course, was that Lucinda had opened her mouth and started babbling about dragons and shiny things and what Haneb said right in front of Colin Needle. Yes, if someone forced him, Tyler would have admitted that he loved his sister. But right now, he didn't like her very much. Colin might be a total jerkwad, but he wasn't stupid. He would definitely be thinking the same things as Tyler was. So it all came down to two questions. Where was Alamu's nest, and how could he get to it before Colin did? Almost halfway through his second summer on the farm now, Tyler knew better than to walk around asking people where Alamu kept his hoard. He didn't want to talk about it to Lucinda either, even if he hadn't been angry with her, because he knew she would have a fit at the idea of him going anywhere near a dragon's nest. His sister was the kind of kid who always waited for the grown-ups to fix things. They didn't, of course, which was why she was grumpy a lot. Tyler had figured out a long time ago that if you wanted something, you had to do it yourself. If he was hungry for cookies, he scavenged money from under the sofa cushions and went and bought some at the store, because Mom sure as heck wasn't going to bake any. But finding double-stuffed Choco Marshes in the grocery aisle had to be easier than finding a dragon's nest in a farm the size of a state park. It turned out to be a good time to ask questions. With Gideon back at home, people were bustling in and out of the house all day long, and Tyler had plenty of opportunities to talk to the farmhands. Kiwa, one of the three Mongol herdsmen, and the one who spoke the least English, still managed to tell Tyler a few things he hadn't known, and his fellows, Jeg and Hoka, were even more help, letting Tyler know all the places that Alamu seemed to frequent. Even Ragnar had useful information to offer. Of course, he spends a lot of time around the reptile barn because that is where his mate and her child live, he told Tyler. And he comes there when we put food out as well, but he also spends many warm afternoons in the sun on that rocky hill there. The big Norseman pointed to a distant granite face, a shiny smear along one of the hills that fenced the valley. Why do you write down these things, boy? You are not going to go near the worm, are you? He will kill you and eat you. That is no joke. Trust me, I don't want to go anywhere near him, Tyler said, which was true. I'm just making notes. That's where I'm going to stop, because we is at the end, and it is 8 o'clock. So, that being the case, let me pop that off there and pop that on. Anyway, so with that, I will be signing off for the night and for the week, and I will be back next week, as far as I know. Same TAD time, same TAD channel, 1 o'clock in the morning Sunday, and then 1 and 7 p.m. Sunday evening. I hope all of you who celebrate Easter had a good Easter. As I mentioned, it rather snuck up on me when last night when people started saying Happy Easter. I was like, wait a minute, that's not for weeks, is it? Oh my God, I've missed it. Shows you how on top of things we are around here. Anyway, so with that, though, I am going to wrap it up for tonight. So thank you very much for your presence and your continuing friendship and support. I ask you to take good care of yourselves, loved ones, friends, and neighbors. I will struggle to do the same here. And until I see you again, be well, take good care, and peace. Good night.